Well, hello, ladies and gentlemen. Hi, I'm Chico Rodriguez, your play-by-play commentary host for this another match from the video library vault of the Cuban Assassin, Richie Acevedo himself. This match here puts the Cuban Assassin as he squares off against one Big Dan Richards in a special chain match. Now, the rules apply for this special chain match that you have to touch all four corners consecutively in order to obtain a victory. And right now you see the Cuban Assassin in the ring with the official of this matchup, which is Andy McQuaid. This match was sanctioned by Commissioner Mike Allen between the animosity between Big Dan Richards and the Cuban Assassin. There you see Big Dan Richards, and this takes place over at the Bargain Park in Beckley, West Virginia for Mountain State Wrestling. This match here taking place back in 2004. Fans, Mountain State Wrestling went all over the state of West Virginia during this time, and a lot of mainly things that happened with the Cuban Assassin and Mountain State Wrestling was in 2002, 2003, because after APW, Appalachia Pro Wrestling, went out of business, then Mountain State Wrestling picked it up. Right now we got Big Dan Richards and the Cuban Assassin scheduled for one fall, and this is a special chain match. Both participants must be bound by a chain between each of their wrists, and we're waiting right now, as you can see, for the chain to come up to be played by the Commissioner Mike Allen. Mike Allen, as you see the introductions going underway now for the Cuban Assassin, and we'll be hearing introductions now for one Big Dan Richards. And you see the Commissioner Mike Allen right there, Mad Mike Allen if you want to call him that, as he steps into the ring with that big long chain. That's right, fans. 20 feet of steel chain must be applied to the wrists of both the Cuban Assassin and Big Dan Richards. And Big Dan Richards asked for this special chain match against the Cuban Assassin due to their most controversial outcome they have now. Later on after this, I was mistaken. I said 2000. This match was back in 2004. This match was actually back in 2003. And 2004, Big Dan Richards actually was an ally with the Cuban Assassin, as well as the Commissioner, Mad Mike Allen, became the manager of the Cuban Assassin, and part of the Cubans militia, if you will, and became very successful because the Cuban Assassin became the Mountain State Wrestling Heavyweight Champion. Of course, the Cuban Assassin, former Appalachia Pro Wrestling APW Heavyweight Champion. And right now you're seeing Mad Mike Allen apply that chain to the wrist of Big Dan Richards, and the official of the match, Andy Quaid, applying the chain to the wrist of the Cuban Assassin. This match takes place from the Bargain Park in Beckley, West Virginia, Mountain State Wrestling, back in 2003 and 2004. And there you see the official, Andy Quaid, rings the bell, and this match is official. And you see a tug of war between Big Dan Richards and the Cuban Assassin. The Cuban Assassin did not want to have this special chain match, but Big Dan Richards is the one who asked for it. And some of the fans are running behind Big Dan Richards to pull the Cuban Assassin in. You might remember one of the epic, look at this, and Big Dan Richards uses the chain as like a belt and starts whipping the Cuban Assassin with that cold steel chain in his back, and the Cuban Assassin trying to take a quick paddle, but look, he's connected and trying to get away from Big Dan Richards in this special chain match here at the Bargain Park in Beckley, West Virginia for Mountain State Wrestling back in 2003. And right now, eye gouged by the Cuban Assassin on the Big Dan Richards. Now the Cuban Assassin's getting a lock of that chain and hitting Big Dan Richards with that chain right now, getting all over Big Dan Richards with that chain. Now I'm going to tell you, there's no way to prepare for a chain match, fan. That is cold, hard steel. And right now the Cuban Assassin using the chain to choke Big Dan Richards, and right now that is not illegal to do in a chain match. That is absolutely, he's allowed to do that, fans. He's allowed to. The only way to win this match is to touch all four corners consecutively. And right now, Irish whip by Big Dan Richards, and he used the chain to clothesline the Cuban Assassin as the Cuban Assassin stepped over that chain, as you just seen right there. This is a very dangerous match. Someone can get hurt in this match, and the Cuban Assassin trying to climb over the top rope. Looks like he's just trying to get away from Big Dan Richards. And right now, he's just climbing over the top rope with that chain, and Big Dan Richards is trying to pull him back into the ring here, slowly pulling that chain and pulling the Cuban Assassin right back into the ring. And right now he's slowly, the Cuban Assassin trying to fight for his life in this special chain match against Big Dan Richards. And Big Dan trying to pull Big Dan Richards over the top rope, it looks like. But Big Dan Richards, being the height advantage, is actually pulling the Cuban Assassin, got him up onto the ring apron right now. And now the Cuban Assassin gouges the eyes again of one Big Dan Richards. As you can see, Big Dan Richards getting ready to get himself tangled up in that chain. The Cuban Assassin is trying to get back into the ring by climbing to the top rope, and he's just punching Big Dan Richards. And Big Dan Richards just jerks the Cuban Assassin, pulls him over the top rope, back into the ring. As you can see, he's getting wild and crazy here, trying to get the fans here at the Bargain Park in Beckley, West Virginia, to get behind him in this special chain match. Right now he's using the chain and choking the Cuban Assassin right now with that chain, which is perfectly legal. The only way to win this match is you must drag your opponent and touch all four corners consecutively. As you see, Big Dan Richards tried a pinfall attempt, and that's not how you win this special chain match. It's a special rules applied in this special chain match. Remember, Big Dan Richards is the one that asked for this match. And right now he touches corner number 1. He comes over, touches corner number 2, going over to touch. He touches corner number 3. All he has to do is touch the 4th corner, and he wins this match. And the Cuban Assassin stops the consecutive corners touching and pulls Big Dan Richards towards him. And now, gives him a low blow there, which is actually perfectly legal, and now uses that chain to beat on Big Dan Richards right now. Got some length of the chain here. Smacks Big Dan Richards with that chain, whipping him with that chain. That cold hard steel, and it slapped around his face, caught him in the ear. Right there, and you can see it. That steel hurts, fans. There is no give with that cold steel and that chain. And right now he's using that chain to apply Cobra Clutch onto Big Dan Richards. Touches corner number 1. Pulling Big Dan Richards, touches corner number 2. Dragging Big Dan Richards to get to corner number 3. It's a fight. Got corner number 3. One more corner, and he wins. And no, Big Dan Richards stops the Cuban Assassin and gets onto the Cuban Assassin now in this chain match, and used that chain wrapped around his fist onto the head of the Cuban Assassin. He slowly pulls up the Cuban Assassin. Now the Cuban Assassin scratches and gouges the eyes, using every dirty trick in the book. Wraps up that chain, punches Big Dan Richards in the head with that chain, comes back again, punches Big Dan Richards again with that chain, just hitting him, trying to draw blood out of his head, but it looks like Big Dan Richards has a hard head right there as he keeps pounding on to one Big Dan Richards. And now the Cuban Assassin falls down to his knees, completely out of fatigue, beaten and battered with this chain. You can see some of the whelps on the Cuban Assassin's back there. It's kind of red, the kind of whelps on his back from this vicious chain match. And now he slowly comes back up, got the chain wrapped around, beating Big Dan Richards into the forehead, and Big Dan Richards is hurting. He's feeling that. He hits Big Dan Richards again. He's trying to bust him open with that chain, and he's doing his best to try to get him busted open. Now he takes Big Dan Richards, touches corner number 1, drags him over, touches corner number 2, goes for corner number 3, but Big Dan Richards is trying to pull, stops the consecutive count, and goes for a clothesline. He ducks under. The chain's wrapped around Big Dan Richards, and Cuban Assassin uses that chain in the back of Big Dan Richards. And right now, Big Dan Richards is in a lot of pain. A little bit of blood trickling from the forehead of Big Dan Richards when he got busted open from that chain of the Cuban Assassin. Now Big Dan Richards fighting back here against the Cuban Assassin. You can see a little bit of blood trickling off the forehead of Big Dan Richards, and now he's banging up on the Cuban Assassin here. Takes him off the rope, Irish whip, comes off the rope, clotheslines him again with that chain, and now Big Dan Richards is going to try to touch the corners now, dragging the Cuban Assassin, trying to force him around to touch those corners consecutively. He's touched 1 corner, he's touched 2 corners, he just needs to touch 2 more corners and he'll win this match. He touches the 3rd corner, all he's got to do is touch the last corner, and the Cuban Assassin steps over the chain, pulls Big Dan Richards, kicks him in the midsection, takes the chain, hits him again. He's already busted open Big Dan Richards. A little bit of blood coming out from the top of the forehead. It's very, very tough head that Big Dan Richards has had to go and get that little bit of blood coming out of that head. And now Big Dan Richards banging on the Cuban Assassin, tearing him down, chopping him down like a tree. Cuban Assassin's down on the mat now, and Big Dan Richards just clobbering with that chain wrapped around his fist onto the Cuban Assassin. You see a little bit of blood trickling out Big Dan Richards' head there. Right now we got a nice good view of it as Big Dan Richards goes and touches corner number 1. He's going to try to touch the corners again consecutively. These two men have had many historic bouts. They were tag team partners. This is before they even became a team. Later on, they would have the infamous Take a Bath match in 2004. Or was it, 2005 is when they had the Take a Bath match. And now they're in 2003 right now, where they started their feud in this chain match. Vicious chain match. They had a series of these matches from Princeton, West Virginia, all the way to Beckley, West Virginia. Fans, historic rivalry feud. These two became allies, then became enemies again. What a history, what a past between these two individuals, Big Dan Richards and the Cuban Assassin. And now the Cuban Assassin is trying to get up. As you can see, the fans are kind of in disarray here at this special chain match. Cuban Assassin's got his flag. He's got his flag. He's going to try to use it on Big Dan Richards, and he does. And he's hitting Big Dan Richards in his back with that Cuban flag. And it's perfectly legal in this match because it's a no DQ, no time limit match. And the only way to win is to take your opponent and drag him and touch all 4 corners consecutively in order to win this chain match. And this is a vicious match, and right now Big Dan Richards trying to get the fans to rally behind him. Both men are beaten and battered with this steel chain, this cold, very cold steel chain. The fans are trying to ride behind him. There's a little bit of blood right now. You can see in the Cuban Assassin's head there. You see a little bit of blood in the Cuban Assassin's head right there, and Cuban Assassin trying to get to his feet. The chain's between these legs here. Dan Richards touches a corner. He comes over. You can see blood trickling off the Cuban Assassin. Oh, and right now the Cuban Assassin just got a low blow there from the chain to his hand there. And Big Dan Richards takes advantage of that chain again, and he's janking again and pulls the Cuban Assassin right on over right there. There's blood you can see on the forehead of the Cuban Assassin. There's a little bit of blood trickling off of Big Dan Richards right there. Both men have been busted open from this chain match, and now Big Dan Richards tries to do the consecutive 4 corners. Right now as it goes around, has his leg kind of tied up in that chain. Now he's got corner number 2. He's slowly making his way to the third corner. Coming over, gets corner number 3 as the Cuban Assassin is just laying down on the mat, beaten and battered and fatigued. And now Big Dan Richards got the chain between his legs, and turnabout's fair play here. And now the Cuban Assassin's returned the favor onto one Big Dan Richards, and now he gets him over. You've seen these two guys using that chain as a weapon like you're supposed to, beating each other up. And I'm going to tell you, when you think about chain matches, one of the most infamous chain matches was just a dog collar chain match from Starrcade 83 between Roddy Piper and Greg the Hammer Valentine. Right now the Cuban Assassin touched 1 corner, comes over and touches 2 corners. These two guys has already got busted open from this steel chain here. Cuban Assassin making his way, touches corner number 3. He gets the 4th corner, he wins. Oh, and Big Dan Richards clobbers him in the face, hits him with that chain, continues to hit him. You can hardly see some of the blood there pouring from the Cuban as he's got the hair covering himself up right there. A lot of hair on him. And right now he's choking Big Dan Richards with that chain, and he's going to, looks like he's going to try to drag Dan Richards to the corners now. He's got Dan Richards with that chain, slowly dragging him on over to go touch the corner. He's got corner number 1. Wait a minute, Dan Richards touched corner number 1 now, but now both of them's touched the corner there. One of them's got to stop one another. Cuban Assassin gets corner number 2. Dan Richards gets corner number 2. It's a 2 and 2, and the Cuban Assassin has no idea that Big Dan Richards touching the corners as he goes around, pulling Dan Richards, touches corner number 3, and now Big Dan Richards touches corner number 3. It is 3 and 3. Cuban Assassin's fighting to pull him over, and Big Dan Richards trying to hold him. And now the Cuban Assassin flips on over Big Dan Richards, and he touches that 4th corner and wins this 4 corners chain match. And the fans are happy here at the Bargain Park in Beckley, West Virginia, as the Cuban Assassin loses this chain match to one Big Dan Richards. And you see the official Andy Quaid showing who won this match. Bitter hard-fought battle between Big Dan Richards and the Cuban Assassin's chain match. Fans, I'm your play-by-play commentary host, Chico Rodriguez, and we'll see you again next time.